Hello and welcome to BloombergQuint. My guest today is Sanjeev Sharma, Managing Director, ABB India. Sanjeev, thank you very much for joining us on BloombergQuint. To begin with, you can give us a barometer of how the economy is doing with respect to capex cycle, which is there. So let me ask you with this question: are we seeing a turnaround in capex cycle, especially private investment into capex cycle?
So, as ABB, as you know, we are focused in three distinct areas. And that's where we can give you a reflection of how we see the market is developing. We are focused on utilities, wherein the generation, transmission and distribution, renewables form part of our portfolio and our engagement in the market. Industry, wherein we have the productivity, energy efficiency, and the automation and robotics that go into that space. And then we have transportation and infrastructure, wherein you have railways, metro, and also high caliber infrastructure projects across the country. So these are the areas we are focused on. And if you see India is a ripe opportunity for all these three, because we need more utilities, better reliability of the power, 24/7 power to all. So it opens up great opportunities. Same way in industry, we use 30% more energy to produce anything in this country. So there is a great opportunity to optimize that footprint. We are focused in providing those solutions. And also in transportation and infrastructure, with railways and metro expansion taking place and a lot of capex formation there, we are engaged there. Now, to your question about how we see the capex cycle, our exposure of our orders and revenues is around government spending as well as private sector spending. And what we see in the government spend, I think is pretty robust. So we are seeing a good capex cycle which has ran through the utility space as well as transportation and infrastructure space. But when we look into industry is a bit muted. But within industry, you have certain segments which are still doing very well, which are very consumer oriented, like the food and beverage and others. I think they are pretty robust. So, but just in terms of reflection of our balance sheet, in 2016, we grew 54% in our orders books. So we have the highest ever backlog in our books that we have experienced in ABB.
Largely on the back of public sector orders?
Largely back the base orders coming from all the segments, plus also some large orders that we have in the utilities space.
Interesting you mentioned utilities, because we had the CMI which came out with a report on capex, and it said there hasn't been any movement in the stalled projects, because that was something which the industry was looking, that there would be some uptake in uninstalling of the stalled projects, and that would drive capex cycle as well as for companies like you who are in capital goods sector. It will start the entire process of fulfilling those orders. Are you still seeing some difficulty in that particular segment, where the stalled projects are still there and they're not getting off to a start?
So see, there are two types of projects which we look at. One is the greenfield projects, wherein the fresh capex come, which is at a large scale. And then you have the brownfield projects, which continues to do the continuous improvement. And given that we are manufacturing in this country for the last 60 years, we have a very strong installed base. So we have opportunities at both in the brownfield space as well as on the greenfield space. So I would say in the industry side, there's much more focus on the brownfield space, wherein people are trying to make best use of their assets they have by putting more efficiency-oriented and productivity-oriented technologies. So they're replacing a lot of equipment to get better output from the plant. And then there are certain segments within industry which are investing all right. But the core sector is still subdued. And as you can see, in last 7-8 years, the industry has invested in capacities. So the capacity utilization is not there where it should be. We have certain segments where the NPAs are sitting both on the balance sheet of banks as well as the you have the assets which are not performing in the private sector. So that's kind of glutting it up into that space. But we see that when we are selective with the industries in the brownfield space, there's a good movement for us. And then there are the selective segments within the industry space which are investing.
So where exactly is the new opportunities coming in? Because the traditional industries are still stuck on those and as you said in the balance sheets, because of balance sheet stress or NPAs, you have renewable energy, which is coming up as a big thing. And I understand, ABB is one of the leading players in the renewable energy space. So, what kind of opportunities do you see in that space, given the fact that we have target of 100 gigawatt for solar, and together between solar and other renewable energy is 175 gigawatts?
Well, I think it has been a great space for ABB here in India, especially the renewables. If you see in last few years, there is a big uptake of solar technology. So we are in the space where we supply or we support our customers with the solar inverters. We happen to have the largest share of the market. I think we did very well in this space. And also we help the customers to connect the solar farms or solar projects to the grid. So that again is another space where we support our customer. And also when the scale of the projects is big, we also do the automation on top of it. I think one good case in example is the Adani Kamuthi project in Tamil Nadu, which is a 648 megawatt project. It's a very large project spread over nearly 1,200 acres. And we have supplied the inverters, we have supplied automation as well as grid connection for that. And it continues to grow. And all the participants in the market who are looking for good quality assets, we are very happy that they come to us and we support them well.
What about the argument that the bidding for these projects now, there's an auction which is going on, the prices are much more aggressive, and beyond a point, it's going to the level of the feasibility is in question.
Mm-hmm. So, see, I think when this renewable energy started, it was very expensive. And everybody say, hey, it will not have a big future because the gap between the grid cost today, grid energy cost today, and the renewable is too big. And everybody was hoping that grid parity should be reached sooner than later. And let me tell you, this industry has done a fantastic job. The grid parity is around the corner, or it's almost there. In fact, the cost that you pay for generating a unit with the thermal footprint is coming very close to, or it already has come close to the renewables. So that's where you have the kind of a tipping point wherein the renewable becomes viable. And that's where you can see that the long-term players in this, energy players in this market are consolidating and investing. So we have not seen any let-up in investments in that. Of course, there is an adjustment of some players who see this unviable based on their business models, but the people who are robust and who have strong business models, they continue to invest in this area. So we have not seen any let up. There are some hiccups here and there on the policy side whenever small policy adjustment is done, especially in the wind segment. In the wind area, wind generation area, I think there is a bit of a slowdown at this point of time because they are trying to absorb certain regulatory and structural changes. But we believe early next year it should pick up as well.
That's interesting which you're telling me. Going forward, as renewable becomes much more, because we have only 16 gigawatts on the ground as of now, and we have to reach 175 in next 4 or 5 years. What kind of opportunity will that throw up for Adani, for ABB? And in your entire business, how will renewable start figuring in terms
Sure.
of revenue mix?
Sure. So it opens, the renewable is a great technology, and we have experienced it in countries like Germany. We participated heavily there, and we know what it takes to have the renewable integrated into the grid. And also there is another aspect of renewable technology. One is to put that on the ground, then connect it into the grid. When you connect it into the grid becomes relatively volatile. It's become unstable because renewables are by nature are not stable source of power. And that's where a lot of smart technologies need to be put in to make sure that the grid stays stable and continues to serve the customers, whether be it industrial or residential customer, without having instability of supply. And that's where ABB is participating in a big way in India. Just to give you an example, we are putting 2 very large energy corridors in this country. One is called Northeast Agra. It's a high voltage HVDC project. It will transfer 6 gigawatt power from northeast of the country to Agra. And then we have another project which we have started this year, again transferring 6 gigawatt of power, that is 6,000 megawatt from Raigad to Pugalur in south to provide a much needed balance in the south of the country on the power side. And the beauty of this technology is that it works in both directions.
Okay.
So like say Raigad is a coal belt, so you can have a lot of thermal power plants which could be pumping power down south. But you should also know that in south we have a lot of renewable power getting generated on the wind and the solar. And if you see the profile of the country consumption of power, western belt of the country is highly industrialized. So they have a peak load during the day and it drops off during the evening time. So if there is a renewable being generated in south and they are not able to consume it all, the same link that is between Pugalur to Raigad, it can reel the power back and can connect into the western or northern grid or any grid that is demanding the power. And at the same time, when the energy consumption pattern changes, it can also have the the consumers on the other end based on how the power dynamics take place. So that's why putting smart and the energy corridors, I think India is doing the right thing, and I think our customers like Power Grid of India have very smart strategies to provide a very stable and very robust grid in future for the citizens of the country.
You also have a play in the electric vehicles, because I understand that today is the last day for submission of bids for the electric chargers, and ABB is one of the companies which is participating in that bid. EESL had already announced 10,000 electric vehicles in the next 9 months they have to supply, and Tata Motors and M&M would be doing that. But you will be providing the electric chargers, which is 4,500 electric chargers, and eventually it will be much more than that. So tell me something about, the biggest debate which is going around is about the electric vehicle infrastructure. How is ABB planning to get into it, and how do you see this entire infrastructure getting spread, not just from one city but across cities?
Well, it's a electric vehicles and electric infrastructure is a great opportunity for ABB, and we have already proven in European as well as American cities that they can rely on ABB electric vehicle charging infrastructure. We are very big in it, and it's expanding very fast. How big is it actually
for ABB?
In terms of if you really look into the cities in Europe which are going for the electric vehicle charging infrastructure, we have a very strong footprint in those cities, be it the bus charging or the car charging. I think that we have very specific technologies which provide these fast charging networks. So now coming to what is happening in India, we really love the way government has announced this policy that by 2030 they will go complete electric in terms of the vehicle policy. And that opens a new direction for the automobile industry as well as for the technology providers like us, because it's a very, very clear direction so that the industry and the technology forces can start working in there. So ABB is going to participate in this opportunity in a big way. We are not the electric vehicle manufacturer, but we are providers of the fast charging networks. It's akin to IC engine technology, wherein you have the IC engine, but you need petrol pumps to fuel in. But here you will require the electric vehicle chargers, which will show up in the apartment blocks, they will show up in the petrol stations or in the highway stops, they will be in the shopping malls. So wherever somebody gets a stoppage, I think they are able to juice up their cars there. So that's the kind of an infrastructure we are going to be in. Yes, we are participating in this opportunity, and we hope to be a significant player in this market as well.
How big is the opportunity for India, in the sense how easy is it to expand this electric vehicle infrastructure? Because one of the biggest constraints we always have is electricity, right? In metros it's easier, but if you go to tier 2, tier 3 cities, it's much more constrained. The government is looking at 100% electrification across the country,
sure.
But it's still a concern because it will take many years before that happens.
So see, at a very fundamental level, if we want to be a green impact country in future as we grow, so you need to generate green, which we are doing. I think with solar, wind, hydro, and we are going in a good direction there. you also need to consume green. So I think that's where this policy matches with each other, that you have the consumption points as well as generation points going green. Now, in terms of implementation, I don't see such a big difficulty, but there are two things that should happen for that. Number one, that there should be enough electric vehicle manufacturers who should set up base in this country. Because right now we have only one or two. The Tatas have also secured this tender. So it means already the local manufacturing companies are ramping up. But we do expect that the global players should join in and set up their production. Precisely. So then what happens is when the consumer has a choice and consumer has a confidence, and when they start buying more of these vehicles, then naturally the demand for the infrastructure will also grow alongside. So I think the offering in the market at a price point and at a proposition point that is attractive for the customers is a prime, the base fundamental aspect of growing this market. But for us to put this as an infrastructure, be it for the buses, it's every bus has a bus stop. So it's a matter of converting that bus stop with a electric boom technology, which we already have, which we have implemented in different cities in Europe. I think that can be very easily implemented here in the country, wherein the bus comes under the bus stop, and then you have a pantograph which goes down and charges the bus with a fast charger.
How economical it is actually compared to traditional fuels?
Well, our calculations tell us that if you are generating green power and you're consuming green power and you run it through the life cycle of the capital cost versus the operating cost, is going to be very cost competitive.
Is it?
Yes.
And you're saying that it's easier to set it up in India.
That's right. And
are you in touch with all the OEMs like Tatas and Mahindras?
We are in touch with the policymakers as well as with the OEMs. I think there's a good encouragement, and I can tell you that many of the OEMs are testing with our technology at this point of time, and I think the ecosystem will grow. So it's a direction which is at the early stages at the moment, but I think as we go forward, it will have a multiplier effect.
One of the biggest triggers for you will be railways. That's what brokerages are betting on. Your Indian stock has been upgraded because the kind of opportunity which is going to come in. And we had Minister Goyal talking about the fact that India would like to go 100% electric engines by next 3 to 4 years. How does ABB figure there? And can you just give us an example of where does ABB fit in the entire thing? Because you don't make electric engines, you come out with the technologies, right?
So see, if you go back many years, about 20 years back, ABB was into engine manufacturing. And we were the ones who supplied a lot of engines into railways. And then the technologies that came in, as per the railway system, it gets distributed among the suppliers to supply it. So we continue to supply core technologies into engine, in the electric engines for the drive, for the propulsion systems, and also for the new generation bogies which will be built by railways. We have a lot of technology that goes in. So it's a very significant part of our portfolio, and we are seeing very good growth there. And I think this morning I was on panel with our earlier railway minister, Mr. Suresh Prabhu, and he made a point that India has spent about $65–70 billion in railways since independence. And now this government has committed same amount at the start of their term. So you can imagine the significant amount of change that will come into technology as well as modernization of railways. And we will have a significant role to play among others.
But what about the change? Because the change is not getting reflected in railways. Last 3 years, we've seen Minister Prabhu talking about policy changes. You had FDI coming into some of the diesel engine manufacturing, but it's a huge beast to turn it around in a matter of 5 years, I would say. But where do you see the opportunity and what kind of growth you see there? If you can give us some color of the growth which is going to come in.
So as far as our view on FDI is concerned, I believe very reason there are a lot of actions in place with the ease to do business. I think FDI has picked up in India, so that's a good positive sign. And with respect to a change to an organization as old and as deep and as big as railways, I believe we like to say the direction and the guidance that the government is doing and the railway ministry is doing. I think that is in the right direction. So typically these changes don't happen overnight, but then it sets the pace for mid to long term change. Be it railways or be it any private large corporation, if you want to restructure your business and you want to restructure the way your business performs, it takes time, because it's almost like a big tanker on the sea that when you turn it, it turns slowly. But we believe the direction is very solid, and the plans and the programs that are being put place on the ground, they'll be very effective going forward.
So in the next few years, will railways be one of the big segments of your revenue going forward?
We definitely believe, I think just like renewables have done for us, I think railways will be a significant player, not only for ABB, but I believe for the entire supply chain in the country. And I think the lot of supply chain will also modernize itself at back of such a high spend by railways. And not only railways, but also by the metro systems which are coming in cities to modernize transportation within our cities.
And we're seeing a lot of cities now going for metros as well. So that's one area which you have always been there.
So
actually,
we have seen metro come into 8 cities, and all cities metros have received ABB technology.
Industry is one of the areas where you're working very closely with them with respect to efficiencies and automation. How is it changing the way industry is doing? One of the biggest adverse feedback about automation is that it leads to loss of jobs. How is efficiency impacting? And because you've been working with a lot of India Inc. companies, you can give us an idea of are they faster adopting technology to than dragging on?
Sure. So as far as the industry space is concerned, or any other space in India, I think good thing about from the business point of view in India is we have a lot to catch up on. And that lot to catch up on is actually nothing but the possibilities and opportunities for the business. Now, if you really look into industry, say starting from the very base level, say on the energy efficiency level, in India, we take about 30% more energy to produce any unit of any product or any service. So that means there is a chance for us to deploy more energy efficient technologies, be it a energy efficient motor or a drive systems, which can reduce the energy consumption footprint of the industry. That 30% energy saved is equivalent to 30% energy produced. So I think that should be one goal for the industry, be it a greenfield project or it's a brownfield project which is running. So I believe a lot of change needs to be carried out how the industry is set up today, and the technologies are available. You don't need to import them. They're manufactured in the country and they're available, and ABB is a big contributor of that. Then when it comes to automation, I think it's a misconception that the automation leads to loss of jobs. I believe that automation is the one which gives you an opportunity to develop and produce world-class products and services. And the automation is about to be more productive. So any society which is more productive, it tends to gain and creates wealth going forward. So I think it has to be seen from that perspective. Automation allows us to do the scaling up. And I believe if we embraced automation or robotics in a big way, going forward for a country like India, we will not be only manufacturer for India, will be also can be the manufacturer for the world. So that should be the vision. And when we want to compete with the world, we need to be better in automation than the rest of the world, rather than lagging behind it, because otherwise we will not be able to compete and our products will not be as competitive as well as attractive to the rest of the world. So it should be seen from a larger perspective. And I see that if we do that right, especially on the automation and robotics, we can be a leading nation because we have the cost arbitrage. We have a manpower which can be deployed in different levels of skills, be it from artificial intelligence, machine learning, and also to the workers who can go to the shop floor. I think we should see holistically this overall opportunity, and I think we have a good play going forward. We should not fear it, we should embrace it.
Sanjeev, you gave us a good picture of the drivers which will be responsible for the growth of ABB India going forward. You at the beginning of the interview, you spoke about how your order book for 16 went up by over 50%. How are we seeing the order book for 2017? And can you give us a color of what kind of growth you're looking at?
So as I explained to you that 2016 order book or backlog went up by 54%. And first half of the year, which is January to March and March to June, we grew 20%. And you can imagine that is also on the back of a lot of spend by the government, and the industrial engines haven't just kicked in yet because we are waiting for the industry to grow. So you can imagine that with half the engine or half the powerhouse working, we still have been able to manage the growth.
So you're saying basically everything coming from the public investment part of it?
Majority of it, and then also a lot of industries in the brownfield as well as in the certain segments are investing, and the transportation and infrastructure. But what we are saying is that the India growth story is really yet to play out. So once sooner or later, whether it takes 6 months, whether 8 months or 2 years, whenever the industry starts reinvesting to to fuel the requirements that the citizens have in this country, and that investment cycle starts, we see a very good future for the capacities that we have put in here in India.
And when do you see that investment cycle coming in as a keen watcher of the industry? When do you see that private investment coming in? Can you say in 6 months, 2 quarters or 4 quarters or end of 2018?
It's anybody's guess. So this morning I was on a panel wherein Amitabh Kant of Niti Aayog was there, and also
he is ever optimistic.
So he was his view was it will be 6 to 8 months. But then also I read an interview by another industry giant who was saying it may take 1 to 2 years. So I think it's anybody's guess.
What is your estimate? Because you are the one who's putting the money on the table, saying that this is what I'm going to grow.
Sure. So as far as our view is concerned, we have a very diverse portfolio. We have 39 business lines which are built inside this country. We have 47 factories. So we have fairly well diversified. So for us, one or the other segment continues to work for us. So we are not over dependent on one. So I think we will continue to extract growth out of this India footprint, and not to forget, we are also exposing our India footprint for exports, and we are growing very well in the export side as well.
What component of your revenues are now exports?
We are about close to 18% on the export side.
Sanjeev, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Nice talking to you.